In the vast expanse of the galaxy, where countless species wage war among the stars, humans are considered nothing more than primitive newcomers. Their technology is crude, their lifespans brief, and their bodies fragile compared to the ancient races that have ruled space for millennia. But there's something the galaxy hasn't learned about humanity yet. Something that even humans themselves don't fully understand. It lies hidden in their blood, in the very essence of what makes them human. When Sergeant Marcus Chen finds himself on a dying alien world, cradling a princess whose people have lorded over lesser species for 10,000 years, he's about to discover that sometimes the greatest strength comes from the most unexpected source. What happens when an act of pure human compassion becomes the catalyst for changing the balance of power across entire star systems? What happens when the inferior species proves that evolution has been preparing them for something far greater than anyone imagined? This is the story of how one drop of human blood rewrote the fate of civilizations. The plasma fire had finally stopped, leaving only the acrid smell of burnt ozone and the distant groaning of a dying starship. Sergeant Marcus Chen pressed himself against the twisted metal bulkhead, his combat armor cracked and sparking from the battle that had raged for the past 6 hours. The Terran Defense Force had sent him and his squad to evacuate civilians from Kepler Station before the Zephyrian fleet could complete their orbital bombardment. What they hadn't expected was to find themselves in the middle of an ancient blood feud between two of the galaxy's most powerful alien races. Marcus checked his rifle's power cell and grimaced. 15% remaining. Not nearly enough if the hegemony forces decided to sweep through this sector again. His squad had been scattered during the initial assault, and his comm unit had been damaged in the explosion that brought down the station's central hub. For all he knew, he was the only human left alive on this metal graveyard floating in space. The sound of labored breathing caught his attention. It was coming from behind a collapsed support beam about 20 meters away. Marcus moved carefully, his boots barely making a sound on the debris-strewn floor. He had learned early in his military career that in space, you never knew if the person around the corner was friend, foe, or something far worse. What he found made him stop dead in his tracks. A figure lay pinned beneath a massive piece of twisted metal, and it was unlike anything he had ever seen. The being was humanoid, but clearly not human. Her skin had a pale blue luminescence that seemed to pulse with her heartbeat, and her features were angular yet elegant, with high cheekbones and eyes that were larger than any human's. What struck him most were her clothes, or rather, what remained of them. The fabric looked like it was woven from starlight itself, and even torn and blood-stained. It held an otherworldly beauty. But it was the insignia on her damaged garment that made Marcus's blood run cold. He recognized it from his military briefings. This was Princess Lyrelei of the Ethereal Dominion, daughter of Emperor Voldris, ruler of over 300 star systems. The Dominion had been humanity's reluctant ally in the war against the Zephyrian hegemony, though their definition of alliance was more like barely tolerating humanity's existence. The princess's breathing was shallow and rapid. A pool of silver liquid that Marcus assumed was her blood was spreading beneath her. Her large violet eyes focused on him with difficulty, and when she spoke, her voice was melodic despite her obvious pain. Human. The word came out as barely a whisper, but there was no mistaking the disdain in her tone. Even dying, she couldn't hide her species' ingrained superiority complex. How fitting. A lesser being to witness my end. Marcus should have left her there. Every tactical manual, every piece of training he had received, told him that getting involved with Dominion royalty was a career-ending move at best, and a life-ending one at worst. The Ethereals had made it clear that humans were useful only as cannon fodder in their war against the hegemony. They had technology that was thousands of years ahead of Earth's best efforts, lifespans that stretched for centuries, and psychic abilities that could crush a human mind without effort. Instead, Marcus found himself kneeling beside her, examining the metal beam that had crushed her lower torso. "Your Highness," he said, not sure if he was using the right title, but figuring politeness couldn't hurt. "I'm Sergeant Marcus Chen, Terran Defense Force. I'm going to try to get you out of here." The princess's eyes widened slightly, as if she couldn't believe what she was hearing. "You would help me?" "Your kind serves at our sufferance, nothing more. We are genetically superior in every way. Our minds can reach across star systems, our bodies are resistant to radiation that would kill you in minutes, and our lifespans are measured in millennia while yours are mere decades." Marcus was already working on the beam, using his armor's servo-assisted strength to try to lift it. "Yeah, well, right now none of that seems to be doing you much good," he grunted. The metal groaned but didn't budge. "Besides, Where I come from, we don't leave people to die just because they think they're better than us. For a moment, the princess said nothing. Marcus could feel her studying him with those unsettling violet eyes. You are either very brave or very foolish, human. Perhaps both. Probably both, Marcus admitted. He activated his emergency beacon, hoping against hope that someone from his squad was still alive to receive it. But I've been called worse things. The princess made a sound that might have been laughter if it hadn't been so weak. I am dying, Sergeant Chen. The beam has crushed my circulation nodes, and I am losing life essence faster than my body can regenerate it. Even if you free me, I will not survive long enough for medical assistance to arrive. Marcus paused in his efforts. In the distance, he could hear the sound of energy weapons firing. The battle wasn't over yet. How long do you have? Minutes, perhaps less. The princess closed her eyes for a moment, then opened them again. It is strange. I'd always imagined I would die in battle, leading my people's fleets against our enemies. Instead, I will die in the wreckage of this pathetic human station, alone except for a primitive soldier who owes me no loyalty. You're not alone, Marcus said firmly. He had made his decision, and you're not going to die if I can help it. He pulled out his emergency medical kit and found what he was looking for, a transfusion unit designed for battlefield emergencies.
The princess watched with growing confusion as he began setting up the device. What are you doing?
I'm giving you a blood transfusion, Marcus said matter-of-factly as he inserted the needle into his own arm.
I don't know if human blood is compatible with your biology, but it's the only chance we've got. The princess's eyes went wide with shock, then something that looked like horror. No. You cannot. Human blood is... Your species is... She struggled to find words. You do not understand what you are suggesting. Marcus looked at her calmly as his blood began flowing through the tube. I understand that you're dying and this might save your life. Everything else is just details. Details? The princess's voice rose despite her weakness. Your blood carries genetic material that has never been mixed with ethereal physiology. The consequences could be... Could be what? You live instead of die? I'll take those odds. The princess stared at him for a long moment. You truly do not comprehend what you are doing. Our species have been separate for millions of years of evolution. Ethereal blood is refined, purified, enhanced through countless generations of genetic manipulation. Human blood is raw, primitive, chaotic, and apparently exactly what you need right now, Marcus said as he carefully inserted the other needle into what he hoped was the ethereal equivalent of a vein. The princess's silver blood was definitely different from human red. The medical scanner on his kit was detecting compatible circulation patterns. As the human blood began flowing into her system, the princess's expression changed from horror to amazement to something else entirely. Her pale blue skin began to take on a warmer hue, and the pulsing light that had been growing dimmer suddenly blazed brighter than before. This is impossible, she whispered. I can feel. What is this sensation? Marcus checked the readings on his medical scanner. Whatever was happening, it was working. The princess's vital signs were strengthening rapidly. Too rapidly. How do you feel? I feel. The princess paused, as if trying to understand something completely foreign. I feel alive. More alive than I have ever felt. What manner of sorcery is this? The sound of approaching footsteps made Marcus grab his rifle. 3 figures in the distinctive armor of the Zephyrian hegemony rounded the corner, their weapons already raised. Marcus recognized them immediately. Zephyrians were tall, insectoid creatures with 4 arms and compound eyes that could see across multiple spectrums. Human soldier. The lead Zephyrian clicked in heavily accented Standard Galactic. Step away from the ethereal royal. Your interference in our righteous execution ends now. Marcus positioned himself between the Zephyrians and the princess. She's under the protection of the Terran Defense Force now. The Zephyrians made a sound that Marcus had learned was laughter. The Terran Defense Force? You primitive mammals think you can stand against the hegemony. We have conquered star systems when your species was still crawling in mud. Maybe, Marcus said, checking his weapons charge. Still at 15%. Not good odds against 3 trained hegemony soldiers. But right now, you're going to have to go through me. The lead Zephyrian raised his weapon. But before he could fire, something extraordinary happened. Princess Lyrelai, who should have been too weak to move, suddenly stood up. The massive metal beam that had been crushing her was now floating in the air above her head, held aloft by some invisible force. But that wasn't the most shocking part. The most shocking part was that her pale blue skin was now shot through with veins of brilliant red light. And when she looked at the Zephyrians, her eyes blazed with an energy that Marcus had never seen before. "You dare threaten the one who has saved my life?" Her voice carried a power that made the metal walls vibrate. "You dare to call him primitive while he has done what none of my own people would have dared?" The lead Zephyrian took a step backward. "Princess Lorelei, we had heard reports of your death." "This is unexpected. As you can see, reports of my death were greatly exaggerated." The princess gestured casually, and the massive metal beam flew through the air to slam into the far wall, embedding itself 3 feet deep into the reinforced steel. "Now, I suggest you and your companions leave this place before I decide to show you what ethereal royal blood enhanced with human vitality can accomplish." The Zephyrians exchanged glances through their compound eyes. Marcus could practically see them calculating their odds. Finally, the leader spoke. "This is not over, Princess. The hegemony's quarrel with the Dominion will not end because of one human's misguided charity."
Perhaps not, the princess agreed.
"But today, this human has changed everything." She looked at Marcus with an expression he couldn't quite read. "Sergeant Chen has given me something I did not know I was missing. Something my people have forgotten in our pursuit of perfection." After the Zephyrians retreated, Marcus found himself alone with a being who was somehow fundamentally different than she had been just minutes before. The princess was studying her hands, watching the red light pulse beneath her blue skin with fascination. "Your blood," she said quietly. "It carries something we lost long ago, something we bred out of ourselves in our quest for genetic superiority." "What's that?" Marcus asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know the answer. The princess looked at him with eyes that now held flecks of brown mixed with the violet. "Potential, chaos, the ability to become something more than what you were born to be." She paused. "Your species calls it evolution, but it is something far more profound. It is the capacity for change itself." Marcus wasn't sure what to say to that. "I just didn't want to watch you die, and in saving my life you may have saved something far greater." The princess moved to where her damaged insignia lay on the ground. With a gesture, she made it float into her hand, then crushed it between her fingers. "I can no longer return to my father's court as I was. This blood that flows in my veins has made me something new, something that has never existed before. Is that a problem?" The princess smiled, and for the first time, it looked genuine rather than condescending. "On the contrary, Sergeant Chen, I believe it may be the solution to a problem that has plagued the galaxy for millennia." She walked to the viewport and looked out at the stars beyond. "The Dominion and the Hegemony have been locked in this war for 1,000 years, each believing themselves to be the superior species. But perhaps what the galaxy needs is not superiority. What does it need?" She turned back to him, and Marcus was struck by how different she looked now. The ethereal, untouchable beauty was still there, but it was tempered by something more grounded, more real. Unity. The strength that comes not from perfection, but from diversity. The power that comes not from isolation, but from connection. She looked at her hands again, watching the red light pulse stronger. "Your blood has shown me that we have been fighting the wrong war, Sergeant Chen. The question is not which species deserves to rule the galaxy. The question is whether any single species should rule at all." Marcus felt like he was standing at the edge of something much bigger than himself. "What happens now?" "Now?" The princess smiled again, and this time Marcus could see the human influence in her expression, the warmth that hadn't been there before. "Now we find out what happens when someone refuses to accept that the galaxy has to stay the way it's always been." Marcus expected to feel the cold touch of ethereal skin, but instead, her hand was warm, almost fever-bright. "You have given me more than your blood, Sergeant Marcus Chen. You have given me possibility, and I intend to make the most of it." 3 days had passed since the transfusion, and Marcus was beginning to understand that he had stepped into something far beyond a simple rescue operation. The princess, who now insisted he call her Lyra rather than using formal titles, had managed to contact what remained of her personal guard. The reunion had not gone as either of them expected. Commander Vexehi, the princess's chief protector, had taken one look at her transformed appearance and immediately drawn his weapon. Marcus watched from behind cover as the tall, graceful, ethereal soldier aimed his energy lance directly at his charge. "You are not Princess Lyreley," Vexhai declared, his melodic voice filled with disgust. You have been corrupted by inferior genetic material. The royal blood has been contaminated beyond redemption.
Lyra stood calmly in the face of her protector's weapon, the red light beneath her blue skin pulsing steadily.
I am more myself than I have ever been, old friend.
This human blood has not corrupted me. It has awakened me. Awakened you to what? Madness? The human is a primitive creature whose genetic material should never have touched royal blood. Look at yourself. You glow with their chaotic energy. You have become an abomination. Marcus tensed, ready to intervene, but Lyra raised a hand to stop him. When she spoke, her voice carried an authority that made the air itself seem to vibrate. Abomination? Is that what you call the ability to feel genuine emotion for the first time in my life? Is that what you call the power to see beyond the narrow confines of our species' arrogance? She took a step toward Vexai, and Marcus noticed that small objects around the room were beginning to float. This human gave me his blood to save my life, asking nothing in return. When did any of our people last show such selfless courage? Vexai's weapon wavered slightly. The royal blood is sacred. It has been refined and perfected over 10,000 years. To mix it with human genetics is to defile everything our ancestors worked to achieve. Our ancestors achieved stagnation, Lyra replied coldly. They achieved a beautiful, perfect, emotionless existence that values genetic purity over compassion, superiority over cooperation. This human blood you despise has given me something our people have forgotten how to access, which is growth. With that single word, Lyra gestured toward the wall behind Vexai. The metal bulkhead, reinforced with materials that could withstand direct hits from plasma cannons, crumpled like paper and reformed itself into an intricate sculpture of impossible beauty. The display of power was casual, effortless, and unlike anything Marcus had ever seen any ethereal accomplish. Vexai lowered his weapon, shock replacing disgust on his angular features. That level of matter manipulation, it should be impossible. Even the most powerful of our scions cannot reshape molecular structures so completely. Yet I just did, Lyra said simply. The human blood has not weakened my abilities. It has amplified them beyond anything our people thought possible. She turned to Marcus, who was still trying to process what he had witnessed. It seems, Sergeant Chen, that your species carries more than just the capacity for change. You carry the genetic key to unlocking potential that even we did not know existed. Marcus struggled to find his voice. I don't understand. Human blood is just blood. We don't have any special powers or abilities. Lyra smiled, and the expression was warm in a way that no pure ethereal smile had ever been. Do you not? Your species has gone from primitive agriculture to space travel in less than 10,000 years. You have survived ice ages, plagues, wars, and countless extinction events. You adapt, you overcome. You refuse to accept limitations as permanent. That is not just blood, Sergeant. That is the rarest force in the universe. Vexai was studying his princess with new eyes. If what you say is true, then the implications are staggering, yes. Lyra walked to the viewport and looked out at the stars. The Dominion has spent millennia perfecting our genetic code, removing chaos, eliminating unpredictability. We became powerful, but we also became static. The hegemony took a different path, enhancing their physical capabilities and technological integration, but they too became locked into a single way of being. She turned back to them, and Marcus could see the red light in her veins pulsing brighter as she spoke. Humans, however, have remained beautifully, chaotically diverse. No two humans are exactly alike, not just in appearance, but in potential. They carry within their blood the memory of every adaptation their species has ever made, and the capacity for adaptations not yet imagined.
That's why the transfusion worked, Marcus realized.
Not just because our blood was compatible, but because it carried something your people had lost. Exactly. And now I carry both our perfected abilities and your infinite potential for change. Lyra raised her hand, and the destroyed sculpture reformed itself into something entirely different, then different again, cycling through dozens of configurations in seconds. I can feel it, Marcus. Every possibility, every path forward, every way things could be instead of how they are. Vexai moved closer, his earlier hostility replaced by scientific curiosity. Princess, if this is true, then you represent something unprecedented, a hybrid that combines ethereal psychic mastery with human adaptive potential. And that's exactly why we cannot return to the Dominion, Lyra said grimly. My father would see this as contamination of the royal line. The Council of Genetics would demand my immediate execution to prevent the spread of human influence. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. So what do we do? Before Lyra could answer, Vexhi's communication device activated. The holographic image that appeared was of Admiral Korath, one of the Dominion's most senior military commanders. The Admiral's perfect features showed no emotion as he spoke. Commander Vexhay, you will report the status of Princess Lyra Lay immediately. Our sensors detected an anomalous energy signature from your location, and we require confirmation of the princess's condition. Vexhay looked at Lyra, clearly torn between his loyalty to his charge and his duty to the Dominion. After a long moment, he activated the communicator. Admiral Korath, Princess Lyra Lay lives.
However, her condition is complicated.
Explain. Lyra stepped into view of the communicator.
And Marcus heard Korath's sharp intake of breath.
Even through the hologram, the change in her appearance was obvious. The red energy flowing beneath her skin was impossible to miss. Uncle, Lyra said formally. Korath was her father's brother, Marcus realized, and had helped raise her after her mother's death. Lyra Lee, what has been done to you? Korath's usually controlled voice carried notes of horror and disbelief. I have been saved, Lyra replied calmly. A human soldier gave his blood to preserve my life when I was dying. The transfusion has had unexpected effects. Unexpected effects? Korath's image flickered as he leaned forward. You are exhibiting energy patterns that register beyond our measurement scales. Your genetic signature has been fundamentally altered. This is not a medical treatment, niece. This is contamination of the worst kind. Marcus stepped into view of the communicator, and he saw Korath's expression shift from horror to disgust. You, the Admiral said, his voice dripping with contempt. You did this to her. I saved her life, Marcus replied evenly. You destroyed her. Do you have any comprehension of what you have done? Royal ethereal blood is the pinnacle of genetic evolution. It has been carefully maintained and protected for 10 millennia. And you, a primitive human with a lifespan of mere decades, have polluted it with your chaotic, unrefined genetic material. That chaotic, unrefined genetic material is what's keeping your niece alive, Marcus shot back. And from what I've seen, it's made her stronger, not weaker. Korath's laugh was cold and bitter. Stronger? You call this abomination strength? She's no longer ethereal. She is no longer royal. She is something that should not exist. Lyra's voice cut through the argument like a blade. I am something that has never existed before, she corrected. And perhaps that is exactly what the galaxy needs. The galaxy needs order, stability, proper genetic hierarchy, Korath replied. Not chaos bred from the mixing of superior and inferior bloodlines. Superior? Inferior? Lyra's eyes blazed brighter. Uncle, in the past 3 days I have accomplished feats of matter manipulation that would astound the Council of Scions. I have experienced emotions and insights that have been bred out of our people for millennia. I have discovered compassion, genuine sacrifice, and the power that comes from choosing to help others without expecting anything in return. If that is contamination, then perhaps we have been too pure for our own good.
Korath was silent for a long moment, studying his niece's transformed features.
When he finally spoke, his voice was heavy with what might have been grief. Lyra Lee, you have been precious to me since you were a child, but I cannot allow this contamination to spread. You will return to the Dominion immediately for genetic cleansing. The human will be executed to prevent any further incidents. No. The single word carried such power that the communicator device cracked. Korath's image flickered and distorted as Lyra's energy surge interfered with the transmission. No, Uncle, I will not return to be cleansed of the greatest gift I have ever received. And Sergeant Chen is under my personal protection. Any attempt to harm him will be considered an act of war against me personally. You cannot declare war on your own people, Lyra Lee. I am not declaring war on my people, Lyra replied calmly. I am declaring independence from a system that values genetic purity over personal growth, tradition over adaptation, and perfection over possibility. Korath's expression hardened. Then you are no longer princess of the ethereal dominion. You are a rogue, and you will be treated as such. The transmission ended, leaving the room in tense silence. Marcus looked at Lyra, who stood quietly contemplating what had just happened. She had just given up everything, her title, her family, her entire life, to protect him and preserve whatever she had become. I'm sorry, he said quietly.
I never meant for you to lose your family over this. Lyra turned to him with a smile that was both sad and determined. Marcus, for the first time in my life, I am not following a path laid out by my genetics, my royal blood, or my family's expectations. I am choosing my own way forward. That is not a loss. That is freedom. Vexhai, who had been listening to the exchange in stunned silence, finally spoke. Princess, without the backing of the Dominion, we have limited resources, no official authority, and nowhere to go that will be safe from both your father's forces and the hegemony. That's where you're wrong, old friend, Lyra said, moving to the tactical display. She activated the holographic star map, and dozens of systems lit up in various colors. We have something more valuable than official authority. We have proof that the barriers between species are not as absolute as everyone believes. She gestured, and the star map zoomed in on a cluster of contested worlds along the border between Dominion and hegemony space. These systems are where the real war is being fought. Planets where multiple species are forced to work together just to survive. Refugees, outcasts, colonists, rebels, all trying to build something new. Marcus studied the map. You want to go to the contested zones? I want to go where my abilities can make a real difference, Lyra corrected. Where this combination of ethereal power and human adaptability can be used to help people instead of maintaining the status quo. She looked at him seriously. But I meant what I said about refusing to leave you, Marcus. This transformation happened because of your selfless act. I will not abandon the person who made it possible. You don't owe me anything, Marcus protested. This is not about debt, Lyra said firmly. This is about partnership. You have shown me that strength comes not from standing above others, but from standing with them. I intend to learn everything I can about that philosophy. Vexhai was still studying the star map. Princess, if we go to the contested zones, we will be beyond the reach of Dominion law, but we will also be beyond its protection. We will be on our own. Lyra's smile was fierce and determined. Good. It's time we discovered what we're truly capable of when we're not bound by the limitations others have placed on us. Quote. She turned to Marcus. Sergeant Chen, I formally request that you accompany me as an advisor and partner in this endeavor. Your people's perspective on cooperation and adaptation could be invaluable in what we're planning. Marcus looked at the star map, thinking about his orders, his duty to the Terran Defense Force, and the life he was being asked to leave behind. Then he looked at Lyra, at the red energy flowing beneath her blue skin, at the genuine warmth in eyes that had once been cold and distant. What exactly are we planning? He asked. We're going to show the galaxy that evolution doesn't have to be a competition, Lyra replied. We're going to prove that different species working together can accomplish things that none of them could achieve alone. She paused, her expression becoming more serious. And we're going to stop a war that has raged for 1,000 years by demonstrating that there's a third option besides dominance or submission.
Marcus thought about his squad mates, probably dead in the wreckage of Kepler Station.
He thought about the endless cycle of violence between the Dominion and the hegemony, with humanity caught in the middle. He thought about the woman standing before him, who had given up everything she had ever known because he had refused to let her die alone. Well, he said finally, I guess I've seen stranger things in the past few days. Count me in. Then let us begin. 6 months later, Marcus stood on the bridge of the Starship Synthesis, watching through the viewport as 3 different species worked together to repair battle damage on a civilian transport. The sight would have been impossible a year ago. Ethereals, Zephyrians, and humans all working side by side, their combined expertise allowing them to complete repairs that would have taken any single species days to accomplish. The ship itself was a marvel of cooperative engineering. Ethereal gravitic systems provided the propulsion. Zephyrian computational networks handled navigation and tactical analysis, and human adaptive engineering allowed for rapid modifications and creative problem-solving. It was ugly by the standards of any single species, but it worked better than anything any of them had built alone. Report from the surface teams. Vexhai announced from the communication station. The ethereal commander had adapted remarkably well to their new mission, though Marcus suspected he was still processing the fundamental changes in his worldview. The refugee camps on Kepler-7 are fully operational. Food production is exceeding projections, and the defensive perimeter is holding against hegemony raids. Marcus nodded, checking the tactical display. Kepler-7 had been a dead world 6 months ago, too damaged by the ongoing war to support life. Now it housed over 50,000 refugees from a dozen different species, all working together to build something new.
The transformation hadn't been easy. The first attempts at cooperation had failed spectacularly, with ancient prejudices and incompatible biologies creating constant conflicts. It had taken Lyra's unique abilities and Marcus's insights into human social dynamics to find ways for the different groups to work together. "Any word from the medical teams?" Marcus asked. "Dr. Rashid reports that the latest batch of volunteers from the Centauri colonies have arrived safely," Vexai replied. "They're eager to begin the enhancement process." Marcus still found it hard to believe how quickly word had spread about what Lyra had become. Within weeks of their arrival in the contested zones, refugees and outcasts from across the galaxy had begun seeking them out. Some came looking for protection from the war. Others came looking for the medical miracles that seemed to follow in Lyra's wake. The enhancement process had been Lyra's idea. She couldn't give everyone her unique hybrid nature, but she had discovered that her transformed blood, when combined with willing volunteers from different species, could create limited genetic bridges. Nothing as dramatic as her own transformation, but enough to allow different species to better understand and work with each other. A Zephyrian engineer could receive enough ethereal genetic material to develop basic psychic sensitivity. An ethereal scientist could gain enough human adaptability to think outside traditional paradigms. A human soldier could acquire enough Zephyrian computational ability to interface directly with advanced technology. It wasn't without risks. Some volunteers experienced rejection reactions. Others found the psychological changes difficult to handle. But for those who successfully adapted, the results were remarkable. "Marcus." Lyra's voice came from behind him, and he turned to see her entering the bridge. She looked tired but satisfied. The red energy beneath her skin had settled into a steady warm glow over the past months, and her eyes now showed flecks of brown, green, and even gold mixed with the original violet. "How did the negotiations go?" he asked. "Better than expected," she replied, moving to stand beside him at the viewport. "Captain Tevek has agreed to join the alliance. The Free Zephyrian fleet will provide escort services for refugee transports in exchange for technical assistance with their older ships." Marcus raised an eyebrow.
Tevek agreed to work with Ethereals.
"Tevek agreed to work with us," Lyra corrected with a smile. "Apparently, the fact that we have managed to stop 3 hegemony raids on civilian targets this month has earned us some credibility among the resistance movements." The synthesis had become something of a legend in the contested zones, a ship crewed by multiple species, commanded by a rogue ethereal princess and a human soldier, capable of outmaneuvering both Dominion and hegemony forces. More importantly, it had become a symbol of what was possible when different species chose cooperation over conflict. "Speaking of which," Marcus said, "we've got a problem. Long-range sensors are picking up a massive fleet movement. Both Dominion and hegemony forces are converging on this sector." Lyra's expression grew serious. "How massive?" 200 ships from each side. Vexahay reported from his station. "It appears both empires have decided that our little experiment has gone on long enough."
Marcus felt a familiar chill.
They had known this moment would come eventually. The synthesis and its allies had been too successful, saved too many lives, demonstrated too clearly that the galaxy didn't need to choose between Dominion perfection and hegemony efficiency. "Time to intercept?" 18 hours, Vexay replied. Lyra moved to the Central Command console, her fingers dancing over the controls as she accessed the ship's full sensor array. "Open a channel to all Allied vessels and ground installations. Full emergency protocol." Within minutes, representatives from dozens of species were appearing as holograms around the bridge. Marcus recognized most of them now. Admiral Chen of the Free Human Fleet, his own sister who had joined their cause 3 months ago. Captain Tevek of the Zephyrian Resistance. Dr. Saurian of the Reptilian Coalition. Commander Vexai of the Ethereal Defectors. And dozens of others, species that had found in their alliance something they couldn't get from either major empire. "Friends," Lyra began, her voice carrying clearly to all the holograms. "We face the greatest test of our alliance. Both the Dominion and the Hegemony have sent fleets to destroy what we have built here. They see our success as a threat to the order they have maintained for 1,000 years. How do we fight 400 warships with what we have?" asked Admiral Chen. The Free Human Fleet had grown considerably since Marcus's sister had brought word of their cause back to Earth, but they still numbered only 30 ships. "We don't fight them?" Lyra said simply. "We show them something better." The holograms stirred with confusion and concern. Captain Chevek's insectoid features showed clear skepticism. "Princess, with respect, Idealism will not stop plasma cannons. Oh, no, Lyra agreed. But evolution might. She gestured, and the holographic display changed to show a complex diagram that Marcus recognized as the enhancement process they had been developing. Over the past 6 months, we have learned that the barriers between species are not as fixed as we believed. With voluntary genetic sharing, we have created individuals who combine the best traits of multiple species. We know this, Dr. Sarian interjected, but the process works on individuals, not entire fleets. Lyra's smile was mysterious. What if I told you that wasn't necessarily true? She activated another display, this one showing the synthesis itself. But Marcus realized he was looking at more than just the ship's structure. The diagram showed energy patterns flowing throughout the vessel, connecting not just the various technological systems, but the crew members themselves. The ship has become a living example of what we're trying to achieve, Lyra explained. The ethereal gravitational systems don't just provide propulsion. They create a unified field that allows the different technologies to interface seamlessly. The Zephyrian computational networks don't just handle data. They allow the crew members to share thoughts and coordinate actions at a level that would be impossible for any single species. Marcus was beginning to understand. You're talking about scaling up the enhancement process to include entire ships, entire fleets. What if the incoming fleets encountered not a ragtag group of rebels, but a demonstration of what their own peoples could become if they chose cooperation over domination? Admiral Chen leaned forward. You want to enhance entire crews? The logistics alone would be impossible, not to mention the risks. The risks of trying are considerable, Lyra admitted. But the risks of not trying are worse. If we fight this battle conventionally, we lose. Even if we somehow win, we prove nothing except that violence is still the ultimate arbiter of disputes. She paused, looking around at all the holographic faces. But if we can show them something they've never seen before, something that challenges their fundamental assumptions about how the universe works, then maybe we can stop this war permanently. Captain Tuvek's compound eyes focused intently on Lyra. What exactly are you proposing, Princess? I'm proposing that we take everything we've learned about genetic cooperation and apply it on a scale that has never been attempted. I'm proposing that we transform our entire alliance into something that transcends the limitations of individual species.
The bridge fell silent as the implications sank in.
What Lyra was suggesting was audacious beyond belief. It was also, Marcus realized, exactly the kind of impossible challenge that humans had been specializing in for millennia. How? He asked simply. With this, Lyra said, holding up a small device that pulsed with the same red energy that flowed in her veins. I've been working with our scientists to create a way to share the enhancement process on a massive scale. Not permanent genetic alteration, but temporary connection. A way for entire crews to experience what it's like to think and work as a truly unified entity. Saurian's reptilian features showed deep concern. The psychological stress of such a connection could be devastating. Most species have never experienced genuine mental unity. Most species have never had a reason to try, Lyra replied. But we do. We have 18 hours to show the galaxy that there's a third option besides eternal war or submission to the strongest. Marcus looked around at the assembled faces. Representatives of species that had been fighting each other for centuries, now working together toward a common goal. It wasn't perfect. There were still conflicts, misunderstandings, moments when ancient prejudices surfaced. But it was working. What do you need from us? Admiral Chen asked. I need every ship, every crew member, every individual in our alliance to volunteer for the most dangerous enhancement we've ever attempted, Lyra replied. I need you to trust me and each other completely. Because if this works, we're going to become something that has never existed in the galaxy's history. And if it doesn't work? Captain Tuvek asked. Then we die trying to show the universe that evolution doesn't have to be a zero-sum game, Marcus said. He had made his decision. I'm in. One by one, the other representatives nodded their agreement. It took almost an hour, but eventually every member of the Alliance had committed to the attempt. 12 hours later, as the first enhancement devices were distributed throughout the fleet, Marcus found himself alone with Lyra in the synthesis observation deck. The preparations were proceeding smoothly, but the uncertainty was almost overwhelming. Are you scared? He asked her. Terrified, she admitted. What we're attempting has never been done before. I have no idea what the long-term consequences might be. She paused, looking out at the other ships in their small fleet. But I'm more afraid of what happens if we don't try. The galaxy goes on the way it's always been, Marcus said. Eternal war, species locked into their roles, no possibility for real change. Exactly. And after experiencing what I've become, what we've all become, I can't go back to that. She turned to him with a smile that combined ethereal elegance with human warmth. Besides, this is all your fault anyway. My fault? You gave me your blood without asking what the consequences would be. You chose to save a life without calculating the political implications. You showed me what it means to act from compassion rather than calculation. She moved closer to him. Everything that has happened since that moment flows from your decision to refuse to leave me to die alone. Marcus thought about that night 6 months ago, when he had knelt beside a dying alien princess and made a choice that had changed everything. I still don't understand why human blood had such an effect on you. Because human blood carries the memory of every challenge your species has overcome, Lyra replied. Every adaptation, every moment when your ancestors chose to change rather than die. That's not just genetics, Marcus. That's the essence of what makes life worth living. An alarm chimed softly, indicating that the enhancement network was ready for activation. In 6 hours, the combined fleets of the Dominion and Hegemony would arrive. In 6 hours, they would discover whether evolution could triumph over warfare. Ready? Lyra asked, her hand hovering over the activation control. Marcus took her other hand, feeling the warm energy that flowed between them. Around the ship, he knew hundreds of beings from dozens of species were preparing to take the same leap into the unknown. Ready, he said. Lyra activated the device, and the universe changed. The connection was unlike anything Marcus had ever experienced. Suddenly, he could feel the thoughts and emotions of every being in their fleet. He experienced the precision of ethereal logic, the computational power of Zephyrian cognition, the intuitive leaps of human creativity, and dozens of other modes of consciousness he couldn't even name. But more than that, he could feel how they all fit together. How ethereal psychic abilities could guide human adaptability. How Zephyrian analytical skills could enhance reptilian patience. How every species' strengths could compensate for every other species' weaknesses. The fleet moved as one entity, each ship positioned perfectly to support the others. When the Dominion and Hegemony fleets arrived, they found themselves facing something that shouldn't have existed. Admiral Korath's voice came through on all frequencies, broadcasting to both Allied and enemy fleets. This is Admiral Korath of the Ethereal Dominion. You will surrender immediately and submit to genetic cleansing. The contamination you represent cannot be allowed to spread. Supreme Commander Wrath of the Hegemony added his own ultimatum. This abomination will be eliminated. The natural order demands that superior species dominate inferior ones. Your cooperation fantasy ends now. Instead of responding with words, the Alliance fleet responded with action. They didn't attack. Instead, they demonstrated. The Synthesis and her sister ships began moving in patterns that defied traditional tactical doctrine. Ships that should have been vulnerable covered each other with impossible precision. Technologies that should have been incompatible worked together seamlessly. And then they began to sing. It started with the ethereals, their psychic voices creating harmonies that resonated across space itself. The Zephyrians added their own clicking rhythm. The humans contributed melodies that spoke of hope and determination. The reptilians provided deep, thrumming bass notes that carried across light years. But it wasn't just music. Woven into the song was every memory of cooperation the Alliance had achieved. Every moment when different species had chosen to work together rather than compete. Every success that had come from combining their unique strengths. The song told the story of a universe where evolution was driven not by conflict, but by connection. Where differences were sources of strength rather than reasons for war. On the bridges of the Dominion and Hegemony fleets, commanders who had never experienced anything beyond their own species' perspectives suddenly found themselves feeling what it was like to think like their supposed enemies. Ethereal officers experienced the raw determination that drove human achievement. Zephyrian warriors felt the patient wisdom that guided reptilian decisions. For the first time in 1,000 years, the fleet stopped shooting and started listening. The song lasted for exactly 18 minutes. When it ended, the silence that followed was profound. Admiral Korath's voice came through the communication channels again, but this time it was different, uncertain. What? What did you do to us? We showed you what you could become, Lyra replied, her voice carrying across all frequencies. We showed you what the galaxy could become if you choose evolution over extermination.
This is impossible, Commander Wrath protested.
but his voice lacked conviction.
Species cannot simply merge their essences. The barriers are too fundamental.
The barriers exist only because you choose to maintain them, Marcus replied, stepping forward to join Lyra at the communication console. We've spent 6 months proving that cooperation is not only possible, but superior to competition. For 3 hours, the 3 fleets hung in space, none moving, all trying to process what they had experienced. Finally, Admiral Korath requested a direct communication with his niece. When his hologram appeared on the synthesis bridge, Marcus could see the change in the Admiral's features. The rigid certainty was gone, replaced by something approaching wonder.
Lyra Lee, Korath said quietly, what have you become? I've become what our people could be if they chose growth over perfection, Lyra replied.
What all of us could be if we stopped seeing differences as threats and started seeing them as opportunities. The Council will never accept this. The genetic purity laws are fundamental to our civilization.
Then perhaps it's time for our civilization to evolve, Lyra said gently.
Uncle, in the past 6 months we have ended 12 conflicts, saved over 100,000 lives, and created technologies that surpass anything either empire has achieved alone.
We have done this not through conquest or domination, but through cooperation. Korath was quiet for a long moment.
If I were to hypothetically recommend that the Dominion consider an alliance with your coalition, what would you require?
Nothing, Marcus said, surprising the Admiral.
We're not looking to conquer or replace anyone. We're just showing that there's another way to live. And if some of our people chose to join your experiment?
Lyra smiled. They would be welcome, as would any being who comes seeking cooperation rather than domination. The negotiations took 3 days. In the end, 17 ships from the Dominion fleet and 12 from the hegemony chose to join the alliance.
It wasn't a majority, but it was a beginning. More importantly, both empires agreed to a ceasefire in the contested zones while they evaluated the implications of what they had witnessed. A year later, Marcus stood on the bridge of the Unity, the Alliance's new flagship. Through the viewport, he could see the construction of Harmony Station, the first permanent base designed and built by multiple species working together. The Alliance now included representatives from over 40 species. The enhancement process had been refined to the point where temporary mental linking was safe and voluntary. The war between the Dominion and hegemony hadn't ended, but it had moved from active warfare to competitive cooperation, each empire trying to prove they could build better alliances than their rivals. Status report, he called out to the bridge crew, which now included 2 humans, an ethereal, a Zephyrian, a reptilian, and 3 species he was still learning to work with.
All stations report ready, sir, replied Lieutenant Catal, a Zephyrian whose enhanced intuition had made her one of the finest tactical officers Marcus had ever worked with. The refugee convoy from the Proxima incident is requesting escort to Harmony Station.
And send word to the medical teams. We've got incoming wounded.
As the Unity changed course to meet the convoy, Marcus reflected on how much had changed since that night he had refused to leave a dying princess alone in the wreckage of a space station. The galaxy was still dangerous, still filled with conflicts and challenges, but now there was proof that those challenges could be met through cooperation rather than conquest.
Marcus.
Lyra's voice came from behind him, and he turned to see her entering the bridge.
She wore the insignia of the Alliance Council now, a symbol that represented not any single species, but the unity they had all chosen to build together. How did the council meeting go? He asked.
We've been invited to mediate a dispute between the Crystalline Collective and the Gas Giant Consortium, she replied. Apparently, word of our success has spread further than we thought. Marcus smiled.
Another impossible problem for the Impossible Alliance to solve.
Exactly.
Lyra moved to stand beside him at the viewport, watching the refugee convoy approach.
You know, I've been thinking about what you said that first night, about not leaving people to die just because they think they're better than you.
What about it? I think that might be the most important lesson our species can teach the galaxy, she said. That compassion is not weakness. That helping others doesn't diminish you. That the measure of a civilization is not how well it dominates others, but how well it lifts them up. Marcus thought about the red energy that still flowed in her veins, the visible reminder of the moment when human blood had mixed with alien nobility and created something entirely new. Think it will last? This alliance, this cooperation? Lyra's smile was warm and determined. It will last as long as there are beings willing to choose growth over stagnation, connection over isolation, hope over fear. She paused, watching,
as the first refugee ships came into view. And thanks to you, Marcus, I think there always will be. As the Unity moved to escort the convoy to safety, Marcus realized that refusing to leave someone to die alone had become more than just a personal philosophy. It had become the foundation of a new way for civilizations to interact with each other.
The human soldier had given his blood to save a dying alien princess. In return, she had refused to leave him behind when building a better galaxy. And together, they had proven that sometimes the greatest strength comes from the simplest acts of kindness.